need a college education? After all, we see that about a quarter of the world's billionaires, supposed to be the most successful people, drop out of school rather than finished their college education. Professor Yang, maybe we should start with you.
Well, I think number one, colleges and universities are a vital force for society, both in helping the young men and women grow up, becoming adults, productive citizens. But in fact, universities play a fundamental role in research and various ways of applications of that research. There are various studies that do show that returns on education, especially higher education, are very high in the United States and across the world, in fact, in developed economies. So in that sense, there is a very strong argument for the average men and women that it's important to get a college education and perhaps even higher. But at the same time, when you mention that quite a few of the billionaires actually have not received a college education, that speaks also to the possibilities that the college education is not the only route to success, in fact. But overall, though, when you think about a quarter of the billionaires do not have a college education, that means 75%, 3/4 of them do, actually. And those that don't, actually, so sort of very often also have received a very good high school education. They have been nurtured to venture out, to strike out on their own, and very often they have gone to college and then dropped out, and so on.
Well, probably they have lost the hope about the college education. Whether or not, let me go to you, Mr. Li in Hong Kong. The question is not necessarily about college education, but what kinds of college education? Is the kinds of college education we are having now outdated? Is it still be able to prepare the students, quote unquote, as Professor Yang mentioned earlier, he specifically used the word prepare. Is that preparation still updated? Mr. D. Mr. Li?
Good evening, Tian Wei. Thank you for your question. I think, first of all, we need to clarify a false observation from just a few billionaires who succeeded and quit from their college education. For example, in my hand, there is a recent study conducted by a British Compare insurance company. The chart shows here, actually, among the top 100 billionaires, on average, almost it's more than half of them have attended college education.
Right.
While you compare that number with the general population in the US 2013, you can see much smaller numbers of the population attended college education. And also for those who quit out from the university education, you can see for the top 100 billionaires, the dropout rate actually is much small. It's around 14%.
Okay. So what are you trying to say, sir?
That means 14 of them.
All those numbers are beautiful. What are you trying to suggest?
Well, I'm trying to clarify that might be a false observation that it seems that college education has no use to make billionaires. And the second thing I want to clarify is that college education is the necessary condition for individuals to succeed in the society, but not a sufficient condition. So these billionaires who quit from college education, they may make it up with other factors, finally succeed in their own businesses.
Ms. Wang here in Beijing, these days we've been talking a lot about entrepreneurship in China, innovation as well. Many believe the so-called traditional education has not been the inspiration for creating neither of this. So what is going on, therefore, with our educational system is a big question mark. Are we really making talents, or are we really making masses? That is the question here. So, Ms. Wang, from your perspective, doing educational research in China for decades, what is your answer?
Well, I think our education system is producing talents, but the definition of talents required by the labor markets are changing. And in today's world, we have higher and higher demands on people's not only the cognitive skills, but also the social and emotional learning skills, and also their abilities to update their knowledge and skills very quickly. So that's why actually the entrepreneurship education has become a catchword in today's education reform. And the one big move is the first is to inject more vocational education element into the regular education system on track. The second is now we are turning into a whole batch of a large group of the university and college into, we call them University of Applied Science, or these are basically tertiary vocational universities.
Well, Professor Yang, if China is having a big question mark, what about the United States? Because many in China and in developing countries look at the U.S. education, believing it is better, at least, in creating talent. But certainly we see many of the billionaires we talked about who drop out from university are actually from the United States. Not to mention many of the other billionaires try to create funds to attract young people. Just quit your college education, come out and do your own project. That's really going to educate you for a whole life. So, Professor Yang, what do we need now? Do we need a professor standing there on the podium preaching us with knowledge and probably the way of thinking? Or should we just have the young people going out into the society, hit the walls, let them learn the lesson, be a tough cookie, as they say, in that way to educate themselves? Professor Yang.
Well, you really asked some of the toughest questions.
Thank you, sir.
In fact, the kind of debate that you just articulated really go back in the Chinese case, of course, goes back to the 19th century. In fact, China has struggled in many ways in its quest for modernity. And of course, you remember that in 1905, the Qing dynasty actually finally abolished the civil service exams because of the need to adapt to a modern world, to introduce science and technology. And in many ways, actually, we continue to be confronting the same questions, except in different guises within China. In the US case, I think there's no doubt the university sector is extraordinarily important. It's a vital part of American society and the economy. Many of the fundamental achievements in science and technology were produced by universities. But as for individuals, however, they not only are functioning in universities, but also they go into an American society that has been very tolerant of failures, of experiments, tinkerers in many ways, and at the same time, also that there has been a culture for fostering innovation, whether it's Silicon Valley or elsewhere now, in many parts, including in Chicago. So in that sense, I think actually what we have is an ecology that accepts people who are willing to experiment. But at the same time, when you mention, however, even in the top, most creative companies, when the CEO perhaps may not have a college education, a formal college education, very often they work with people who do, who know the technical skills, who can write the codes, who can formulate the new drugs and so on. So in that sense, it depends on the industry. It depends on the where actually you're trying to make sort of the new creative solutions. Universities are not always successful in teaching creativity, but it's this entire ecology, including universities, companies, and so on, that do create. And it's, in that sense, actually, we need all sorts of people, visionaries, the Elon Musks of the world who think outside of this world in many ways. But at the same time, we need a lot of people who create the technical details as well.
But Professor, let me just follow up by asking you, and I expect a simple answer from you as well. Can the role of university change if universities are not really churning out the top level talents? Then can university switch its role? I mean, universities can still exist, but the role of university is rather not only an educational institution, but more of an incubator for big talents, incubator for the top of the cream. Can we see that happening in the near future? Professor Yang, very briefly.
Absolutely. That has been the case throughout history. You look at the American universities, for example, in the old days, they were pretty much seminaries, missionary enterprises designed to teach the next generation priests, to produce the priests, and so on. But over time, especially towards the end of the 19th century, the American university system began to undergo a major change and transformation, led by universities such as the University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, and Rice, and so on. So in that process, it unleashed changes, and of course, American universities both cooperated and have both cooperated and competed against each other. So as a result, American universities have become much more research-oriented over time. Today, in fact, including at the University of Chicago, we actually have the Chicago Innovation Exchange. And in fact, it's designed to foster innovation. Universities also have offices to help their professors to, for example, to license the technologies, their new findings, to companies and so on.
Of course.
So increasingly, universities are also not just actually educating, but also they are creating and also working with industry, partnering with them.
Well,
yes,
we have
indeed.
seen the role of some university been evolving so far, but the overall educational system is still a big question mark, not only here in China, but also elsewhere. That is one thing why people talk about this debate, whether university education is still very useful and efficient. The other reason is because of the pretty much high university tuition, the hiked up tuition fees of recent years has also fueled the debate that we talk about. In Western countries, the inflation of tuition fees has become a social problem. For example, in the UK, the country itself, a decade ago, local students enjoyed free college education if they chose to pursue the option. But now, tuition fees has hiked up so much that they are paying as much as overseas students who used to pay nearly 3 times as much compared to their local classmates. As a result, we've seen student protests even in that country. And this pushback is happening in the US as well. One of the reasons Bernie Sanders has won so many young people's heart seems has a lot to do with his proposals about the college education and the tuition fees. Putting those things aside, what reason do you think, Ms. Wang, is the existence of universities? Should there be money-making machines? Should there be a top or a ceiling as to how much the tuition can go? Can university students can still afford at all anymore a college education, a good one?
Well, the university or education is generally perceived as the public good, and it's not a commercial product. But it really depends on what kinds of university you are referred to. If they are public universities that offers the mass education, and then there should be the ceiling, or it should be the threshold for the charging of the tuitions and fees. But if it's private university, and that is basically market oriented, and then I don't think there is any problem if they charge high tuition fees. I think the baseline is to ensure that the students who are talented can go to or obtain a good university education with the support, financial aid from the governments, including the scholarships, student loans, or subsidies, etc.
Well, Mr. Li, we only have 30 seconds left. I know it's a very hard situation to answer any question, but the thing is, we've seen universities used to be affordable and now ever more difficult. So the question is, when everybody can feed themselves and want to look for better higher education, should there be a top for the tuition? Final words from you.
It's a very interesting question indeed. But I think I would not suggest youth to quit from college, and of course they should take advantage of college university to further develop their career. In China, due to the Confucian heritage, which views education is very, very important. And China is a credential society. And everybody values that, and if you don't have that, that will be a big problem. And in the future, for the career development, that will be a big problem.